The sun hung low over the Montana Territory, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold as the train hissed to a stop at the small wooden platform. Sarah Mitchell stepped down carefully, her blue prairie dress catching on the rough wood as she surveyed her surroundings with growing apprehension. The town of Copper Creek was smaller than she'd imagined, barely more than a handful of buildings scattered along a dusty main street. She clutched her worn leather satchel tighter, searching the sparse crowd for the man she'd been corresponding with for 6 months. Mr. James Hawthorne had written eloquent letters describing his prosperous ranch and his need for a refined, educated woman to help him build a life out west. She'd sent him a photograph taken 3 years ago, when she'd been 20 pounds heavier and her hair had been darker, styled in the latest Boston fashion. A tall figure separated from the shadows near the station house. He wore a black hat pulled low, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the sharp line of his jaw and the way his hand rested casually near the revolver at his hip. This was not the gentle shopkeeper she'd expected. He stopped a few feet away, his gray eyes sweeping over her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The silence stretched between them like the endless prairie beyond the town. "You're not what I ordered," he said finally, his voice rough as gravel. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Heat flooded her cheeks, whether from humiliation or anger, she couldn't tell. "I beg your pardon?" He pulled a photograph from his vest pocket, the same one she'd sent months ago. This woman had dark hair, fuller figure. "You look half-starved, and your hair's gone lighter than wheat in August." "I've been ill," she said stiffly, which was true enough. The consumption that had taken her mother had nearly claimed her as well. She'd spent months recovering, emerging thinner and changed. "And my hair lightens in summer. It always has. I'm still Sarah Mitchell, Mr. Hawthorne." "Name's not Hawthorne," he said, tucking the photograph away. "It's Garrett. Cole Garrett. James Hawthorne was my business partner. He died 2 months back. Threw from his horse." Sarah felt the platform tilt beneath her feet. "Died. Got the telegram about you after we'd already buried him. Figured you'd spent your money on the ticket, and winter's coming on hard. Didn't seem right to leave you stranded." She looked at this stranger, this Cole Garrett, with mounting horror. "Then why am I here?" "Because I need a wife," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "Ranch won't run itself, and I've got a boy who needs a mother." "A boy?" Sarah's voice rose an octave. "Mr. Garrett, I agreed to marry Mr. Hawthorne after months of correspondence. I don't know you at all. Don't need to know me." He gestured toward the mountains, where the sun was sinking fast. "It's a day's ride to my ranch. We can get married at the church here before we leave, or I can buy you a ticket back east. Your choice, but you've got about 10 minutes to make it before the preacher heads home for supper." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. She'd sold everything she owned to come west. Her father had died in debt, and her mother's medical bills had consumed what little remained. There was nothing waiting for her back in Boston except poverty and the charity of distant relatives who'd made it clear she was a burden. "What kind of man proposes marriage to a complete stranger?" she asked. "The practical kind," Cole said. "I'm not looking for love, Miss Mitchell. I'm looking for someone who can cook, clean, teach my boy his letters, and help manage the household accounts. In return, you'll have a roof over your head, food on your plate, and my name for protection. It's a business arrangement." "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll be on the next train east, and I'll find someone else." He pulled out a pocket watch, checking the time with deliberate slowness. 9 minutes. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of the cold Boston winters, the cramped boarding house where she'd spent her last nights, the pitying looks from former friends who'd heard of her reduced circumstances. She thought of her mother's final words. "Be brave, Sarah. Sometimes survival requires courage more than love." "Very well," she heard herself say. "I'll marry you." Cole nodded as if she'd simply agreed to purchase a pound of flour. "Good. Leave your bag here. We'll collect it after." The wedding was brief and businesslike. The preacher, a weathered man who'd clearly performed this ceremony for many reluctant frontier brides, rushed through the words with practiced efficiency. Cole produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, sliding it onto Sarah's finger without ceremony. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Cole didn't kiss her. He simply shook her hand, paid the preacher, and led her back outside. A wagon waited by the station, and Sarah noticed a small boy sitting in the back, his legs swinging over the edge. He couldn't have been more than 6, with sandy hair and solemn dark eyes that watched her with obvious suspicion. "This is Thomas," Cole said. "Tom, this is Miss Sarah. She's your new mother." "Don't need a mother," the boy said, his chin jutting out stubbornly. "Had one already." "Watch your manners," Cole said, but not unkindly. He helped Sarah into the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her, taking the reins. As they left Copper Creek behind, Sarah watched the town shrink into the distance, replaced by endless stretches of grassland and the looming mountains beyond. The silence was broken only by the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional call of a bird. "Your wife," Sarah ventured after a while. "Tom's mother. When did she pass?" 2 years ago. Fever took her in 3 days. Cole's voice was flat, emotionless. "She was a good woman. Kind. Nothing like you." Sarah bristled. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're city-bred. Soft hands, fancy dress, probably never done a hard day's work in your life." He glanced at her sidelong. "I know you're running from something, same as half the people who come west. And I know you're brave or desperate enough to marry a stranger, which makes you either foolish or practical. And which do you think I am?" "Haven't decided yet." They rode in silence as the sun disappeared and stars began to emerge overhead. The temperature dropped quickly, and Sarah shivered in her thin dress. Without a word, Cole shrugged out of his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled of leather and wood smoke and something indefinably masculine. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Can't have you freezing before you're any use to me," he replied, but there was less edge to his voice. It was full dark when they finally reached the ranch. Sarah could make out the shape of a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Cole helped her down from the wagon, and she swayed slightly, exhausted from the journey. "Kitchen's through there," he said, pointing. "Tom will show you where everything is. I've got to see to the horses." Inside, the house was surprisingly well kept, though it had the spare, masculine feel of a home without a woman's touch. Tom led her through the rooms with obvious reluctance, showing her the kitchen, the sitting room, and finally, a small bedroom upstairs. "This was my ma's sewing room," he said. "Pa says it's yours now." Sarah looked at the narrow bed, the simple dresser, and felt a wave of relief that she wouldn't be expected to share Cole's room. "It's perfect, thank you, Tom." The boy studied her for a long moment. "You gonna leave like the others?" "Others?" "Pa hired 3 housekeepers after Ma died. They all left. Said the work was too hard, or they was scared of the Indians, or they missed the city." His small face was serious. "You gonna leave too?" Sarah knelt down so she was eye level with him. "I'm not going anywhere, Tom. Your father and I are married now. This is my home. You promise?" She thought of all she'd left behind, all the bridges she'd burned to come here. "I promise." Over the following weeks, Sarah learned the truth of Cole's words about hard work. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her days cooking, cleaning, mending, and tending the kitchen garden. Her hands, once soft, developed calluses and blisters. Her back ached from hauling water and scrubbing floors. But slowly, grudgingly, she began to find a rhythm to the work. Cole was a man of few words, but she learned to read him through his actions. He always brought in extra firewood before a storm. He left the gentlest horse saddled for her when he thought she might want to ride. He never criticized her cooking, even when she burned the biscuits or oversalted the stew. Tom was harder to win over. He tested her constantly, tracking mud through the clean kitchen, hiding her hairpins, pretending not to hear when she called him for lessons. But Sarah was patient. She told him stories at bedtime, taught him to read using his mother's old books, and never forced affection he wasn't ready to give. One evening, about 6 weeks after her arrival, Sarah was preparing supper when Tom burst through the door, his face streaked with tears. "Miss Sarah, come quick. Pa's hurt." She ran outside to find Cole limping toward the house, his leg bleeding through his torn pants. He'd been kicked by a horse, he explained through gritted teeth, and needed stitching. Sarah had watched her mother tend to the sick and injured in Boston. She'd never done it herself, but she understood the principles. She heated water, threaded a needle with steady hands, and worked by lamplight to close the gash while Cole gripped the table edge, his jaw clenched against the pain. "You're full of surprises," he said when she'd finished, accepting the whiskey she offered. "I told you," she replied, cleaning the blood from her hands. "You don't know anything about me." He caught her wrist gently, his thumb brushing over her roughened palm. "Maybe I'd like to." Something shifted between them in that moment. Over the following months, their business arrangements slowly transformed into something resembling partnership, then friendship, and finally, tentatively, something more. Cole began talking to her in the evenings, sharing stories of his life, his dreams for the ranch, his grief over losing his first wife. Sarah told him about her childhood, her parents, her fears and hopes. They discovered shared laughter, comfortable silences, and a growing mutual respect. Tom, seeing his father's happiness, began to warm to Sarah as well. He started calling her Ma one day without fanfare, as if she'd always held that title. On a spring morning nearly a year after Sarah's arrival, she stood on the porch watching Cole and Tom work in the corral. Cole looked up, caught her eye, and smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made her heart skip. He walked over, taking her hand. "You know," he said, "when you stepped off that train, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake." "Because I wasn't what you ordered?" Sarah asked, echoing his words from that first day. "Because I thought I was getting a housekeeper," he said softly. "But somehow, without either of us planning it, I got a wife. A real one." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Best mistake I ever made." Sarah leaned into his embrace, looking out over the land that had become her home, at the boy who'd become her son, and the man who'd taken her hand that first day and, despite everything, had made her his wife in every sense that mattered. "Not a mistake," she whispered. "A miracle."